So that is one of the lessons that we trace back to Henry Pottinger's day. Ingenious, and that was when Hong Kong's luck started. Because those three rules were great to keep political control despite a lack of budget and headcount. Yes. But the unintended consequence, well, those three rules also created unprecedented prosperity in this place, right? And this economic miracle.
I couldn't help but just thinking about in today's internet, because of the lack of control, because it is so universal, even the codes you use are pretty much universal, okay? And it's blossoming and it's beyond control, okay? Think about Hong Kong as a little miniature of that at that point.
Yes. In fact, we're probably the dark web. A lot of stuff they're not supposed to go on will go on in Hong Kong. Anyhow, Hong Kong's luck continued on with the fortunes of the British Empire, and because of our geography.
Well, I need to ask you again. What do you mean? Why you keep saying that that's luck? That because of these three policies, it's not luck.
Luck. These three policies are obviously not luck. These three policies were clearly thought out by Henry Pottinger and implemented.
Right.
But Henry Pottinger didn't have to take Hong Kong. He could have say gone to Shenzhen.
Right.
Zhongshan.
Right.
Right. He could have gone anywhere along the river estuary. Right. Why Hong Kong? He could have gone to Shanghai. He could have gone somewhere else. He doesn't have to be Hong Kong. It's just so uniquely. It has this Pearl River. It doesn't have to be Pearl River. It could be somewhere else.
It just happens
it could be
to
Tianjin.
be. So you call it
just
luck.
Right.
Right.
Just dumb luck. China has three major rivers. Why the Pearl River Delta? Why not some other river delta?
Right. Now the audience know. Here we go. Hong Kong.
Yes, Hong Kong. Yeah, that's right. And lots of fortunes. Hong Kong's fortunes, of course, it kept on growing. Lots of disturbances around the area. Hong Kong became that oasis of peace. All right. Dr. Sun Yat-sen, who eventually overthrew the Qing dynasty and established China as a republic, right? Based in Hong Kong, went to Hong Kong's medical school. He was a student in Hong Kong. He was a long time based in Hong Kong. In fact, if you go to Hong Kong Island right now, there's actually a trail dedicated. You can walk this trail. It's in the urban area, so it's not a very long trail. Where he hung out. So Dr. Sun Yat-sen overthrew the Qing dynasty, based in Hong Kong, for a large part of his life. Then, before 1949, Hong Kong was actually the Chinese Communist Party's biggest base in southern China.
Now that I didn't even know. Let's clarify that again.
I was told that by my former mentor, where I served an internship for a year. The Undersecretary for the Environment right now, a former Hong Kong legislator by the name of Christine Low. She also went to my high school.
Yeah.
She only went to my high school.
I heard of her.
But anyway, she told me that Hong Kong was the biggest base for the Chinese Communist Party in southern China prior to 1949. Okay, so Hong Kong had that tradition of allowing a lot of things that goes on.
So you are talking about more than just the commercial item. You're talking about influx of ideas.
Yes.
It's a safe house for anybody.
Well, I won't call it. They didn't actively protect anyone.
Yeah.
They simply said, we are not going to discriminate. Whoever wants to come, come. I guess, in the eyes of the nationalist, the Kuomintang, for you American viewers out there, Chiang Kai-shek hated the communists probably with the same intensity as Assad hates ISIS. Imagine a city near Syria in which they are harboring ISIS. That city better be pretty good, right?
Right.
So anyways, Hong Kong should have ended as a British colony. Hong Kong's luck, if you define luck as running a set of public policy which reflects Victorian British imperial values, okay? Those luck should have ran out with the British Empire around the Second World War.
Why so? Can you extrapolate that a little
bit? If you look at if you look at the end of the First World War, when the Treaty of Versailles was signed, that was at least landmass-wise, the apex of the British Empire, right? I controlled India, Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, most of Africa, lots of Asia, North America, Canada, bits of South America, but you knew its power was in decline.
Right.
The First World War sapped its imperial energy, and it just couldn't afford running the empire anymore. And in 1941, the Japanese, in fact, proved beyond a doubt that the British can no longer hold Hong Kong as a colony.
Yeah, I think they just simply marched in, except for little resistance in new territory.
Right. On the 8th of December, or 8th of December 1941, the Japanese marched into Hong Kong. For you American viewers out there, that date sounds sort of familiar because it's a day after your Pearl Harbor got bombed. But I would just like to say that it is that Japanese bombed Hawaii, and
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor, and marched into Hong Kong at the same time. We are a day ahead because Hawaii is behind the international dateline, right? So it was a simultaneous operation, and they attacked us, and within 3 weeks Hong Kong fell to the Japanese.
Right.
Proving beyond a doubt that there was never enough military power in Hong Kong to defend Hong Kong. And Hong Kong was unmolested, both due to the unseen empire power of the British, and also because of policies in place in Hong Kong. And in fact, if you were to ask lots of governors since the 1840s up until probably the 1920s and 30s in Hong Kong, they would all say the single biggest threat to Hong Kong's remaining as a British colony would probably come from China. But then China was very weak, right? They would have never imagined to be the Japanese. Okay? So, those of you who's watching it will probably ask me now, if Henry Pottinger is so good and his 3 rules are so good at preventing attacks,
Right.
why did the Japanese choose to attack Hong Kong? That is a very good question. My guess is this. My guess is that Hong Kong, of course, being part of the British Empire, had to officially participate in a lot of British imperial actions. All right? And you got to understand, if you went to the American school system, if you were brainwashed by the American school system, Second World War lasted 3-4 odd years, right? From when Pearl Harbor attacked to when the Japanese surrendered after Nagasaki got bombed. But if you went to the British system, the Second World War started in 1939 September when Nazi Germany marched into Poland. If you were brainwashed by the British, that was when the war started, right? But if you were brainwashed by the communist Chinese curriculum, war started in 1937 when the Japanese marched from Manchuria into China.
8 years.
8 years,
Yeah,
right. Cantonese called Balikongji, which literally means the 8 years resistance.
8 years of
resistance.
defiance as well. Yeah.
Yes. So it depends on which school system you went to. But my guess was that if Hong Kong followed through, if you went to the shrine where they worship or commemorate Japanese soldiers, together with, of course, Japanese war criminals in Tokyo, there's a museum next to that shrine, and in that museum it talks a lot about the Second World War and the reason that caused the Second World War. And if you go to that museum, you get a feeling that the Japanese explains that they went to war because they faced an unfair embargo on one particular commodity: oil. Alright? So, if Henry Pottinger's rule of anyone being able to come to Hong Kong to buy whatever they wanted in whatever quantity that they can afford, the logical extension would be the Japanese come to Hong Kong to buy all the oil they want to and ship back to Japan. Right? But my guess is that Hong Kong uncharacteristically participated in the oil embargo against Japan just before 1941.
I see.
And the reason, my guess is that after 1939, when Churchill, or at least Britain, under Neville Chamberlain, declared war against Nazi Germany, Britain's #1 national goal was to get the Americans to join them. Right? Because they know that without the Americans, they can't beat the Japanese. They can't beat the Germans. So getting the Americans on side was policy #1, and obviously the easiest way to get the Americans on side is to get the Japanese to attack them. And once the Japanese attacks the Americans, or some sort of conflicts break out between the Japanese and Americans, then Nazi Hitler, being Hitler, would then honor his agreement with the Japanese and declare war on whoever the Japanese declared war on. Right. So that was a calculation probably by Churchill himself. Therefore, to provoke the Japanese, you trade embargo them on that one commodity they like, which is oil. All right. So the Hong Kong participated in that. I mean, you would say, "Wow, that's so Machiavellian." Yes. That also, yes, I am saying explicitly, Churchill sacrificed Hong Kong as a pawn in this war against fascism.
That's one unlucky point in Hong Kong.
Yeah, that is why hats off to all those people who stayed in Hong Kong, who might have understood what Churchill was doing when they asked Hong Kong to participate. There's lots of British colonialists stayed in Hong Kong during that period, and if they knew how to play the empire game, they knew that they're going to be provoking the Japanese to attack, or maybe they were just so blindly trusting in the powers of British imperialism that they thought the Japanese would never dare to attack. Because they might be racists, really, and think that these, yellow folks would never be able to attack the British imperial power. Okay? So, but anyways, that's what the Japanese proved beyond a doubt in 1941, that Hong Kong cannot defend itself, that the British Empire cannot defend Hong Kong, and that should have been the end of Hong Kong. Hong Kong's luck. Hong Kong's luck should have ran out. And once again, if luck is defined as running Victorian era British imperialistic policies of laissez-faire.
I mean, the history have clearly shown it's a fact. Okay, Hong Kong, very, very hard to defend from far away.
Yes.
Okay, period.
Right. So, in 1945, when the Japanese surrendered, because Japanese, of course, obviously they overstretched themselves, right? So they surrendered, and they retreated, and by default, Hong Kong was returned back to the British. Churchill wanted that. Roosevelt suggested putting Hong Kong under United Nations administration. China, being one of the supposed victorious powers, wanted Hong Kong back as well. But then Kuomintang was knee-deep in the civil war against the communists, so Churchill basically got his own way. And Hong Kong was kept as a British colony.
It is amazing that Hong Kong was not given back to China.
Well, yes, but Chiang Kai-shek has this really weird, I guess, relationship with the British as well. I think, because Chiang Kai-shek was buddy-buddy. If you look back in history, Chiang Kai-shek actually went to Nazi Germany to observe how they ran their army, right? So there was this uneasy thing, I guess. Churchill hated everything about the Nazis, right? So they just thought, maybe Churchill thought Chiang Kai-shek wasn't. Chiang Kai-shek was borderline fascist himself. I mean, he never allowed, for example, liberal democracy to flourish in China, right?
Hell no. Yeah.
So so maybe there was something going on there, but Hong Kong wasn't returned. The Churchill sat, but then of course, because the British themselves knew that Hong Kong couldn't be defended, they started thinking about alternative policies, Plan Bs. And one of the Plan Bs they came up with, in fact, it's very famous within the Occupy Central days last year in Hong Kong, was that a lot of students in Hong Kong said, well, the British first came up with the idea of genuine universal suffrage for the people of Hong Kong to elect our own executive and legislative branches of government in the period just after 1945. That was no coincidence. That wasn't some enlightened stroke of genius. That was on the table because the Brits knew that they couldn't hold Hong Kong. So might as well say, if there's going to be a future of Hong Kong, you guys decide. But then, like so many things in Hong Kong, history intervened again. Surrounding geopolitical situations intervened. First of all, there was of course a civil war in China, and in 1949 the communists won.
Right.
The communists won, but then of course it is a big country. So in 1949 it took them a few years to settle the country. And Britain, being very smart, was one of the first countries to recognize what was then called Red China. Right? Being a doctorate degree holder, Dr. Bob, you obviously access a system called LexisNexis, right? To find your academic papers, right?
Right.
According to LexisNexis, in fact, which is very heavily American in its academic papers archive, there is no People's Republic of China prior to 1972. Prior to 1972, it's always been called Red China, right? As versus the Republic of China that was based out of Taiwan.
Well, that has nothing to do with my degree.
No, I'm just saying that you're familiar with the LexisNexis system.
Yeah, that I do.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyways, Britain, bucking American pressure, recognized People's Republic of China very quickly. And in its congratulatory telegram, supposedly, Chairman Mao, he says that we have some gifts for you. One of the gifts were there were 2 planes parked on the runways of Hong Kong airport that was owned by the Kuomintang. Nominally assets of the Republic of China, confiscated by the British and given to the People's Republic in Beijing. There was also the half-built Bank of China headquarters. There was in Hong Kong Central, you can go visit. It's built of granite. It's next to the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation's headquarters. And that semi-built headquarters was also confiscated and given to Beijing. Kuomintang wasn't pleased, and they filed a judicial review with the Hong Kong courts, but the Hong Kong courts ruled against them. So it was given to Beijing. Of course, then a very, very important geopolitical event happened that basically saved Hong Kong's bacon.
So this is luck number 2.
Yes, this was probably luck number 2. Luck number 1 being Henry Pottinger taking Hong Kong, and luck number 2 intervening again. Luck number 2 was the Korean War. The Korean War was important for Hong Kong because it was around when Khrushchev seized power after Stalin's death, and in a huff of anger, Soviet Union temporarily pulled out of the United Nations. It was coincided with Kim Jong-il, right? Kim Jong-il, the senior Kim, invading the South, trying to reunite the Korean Peninsula. So Kim Jong-il marched into the South, passes the armistice line, the demarcation line between North and South Korea, and they nearly defeated the South. But then, just before the South got defeated, the United Nations passed a motion through the Security Council to basically kick the North Koreans out of South Korea. General MacArthur led the army, landed at Incheon, which is now the airport for Seoul, and marched towards Pyongyang. I think they got very far. In fact, they were about to approach the Yalu River, which is the river that demarcates the Korean Peninsula.
All the way up north.
Right, that demarcates the Korean Peninsula with mainland China, with communist China.
Right.
So suddenly, supposedly millions of quote-unquote volunteers from mainland China rushed in aid to their North Korean communist comrades, and pushed the Americans back to the armistice line. Okay. But so you would say, well, what's the big deal? The big deal is that when the mainland Chinese volunteers, this is according to official, they call it volunteers, when the Chinese army arrived, the United Nations then passed a trade embargo on the Red China, People's Republic of China itself. So what does it have to do with Hong Kong? It has to do with Hong Kong because Hong Kong fulfilled, at least followed, Henry Pottinger's third rule of being a free port, including the enemies of the British Empire, and there were infamous smuggling activities going on in Hong Kong back then, in which massive amounts of supplies was shipped through Hong Kong into China. Supplies nowadays, supposedly medicine, clothing, stuff like that, fuel, but a lot of people in Hong Kong suspect that a lot of ammunition also got shipped through Hong Kong into China. You got to understand that we are talking about a part of the British Empire, which is part of the Security Council, which supported a trade embargo on Red China. So if people of Hong Kong knew about the smuggling activity, the colonial government in Hong Kong knew it as well. They had to, and yet they condoned it. They didn't do anything to stop it. And we're talking about that they supplied a nation that was actively fighting on the battlefield against their supposed best allies, the American army.
Right.
Think how scandalous is that? But yet that was the exact kind of imperial politics that kept Hong Kong in place.
Well, that Korean War is it's a side story. I actually knew a member who had been in that war. The guy actually has shown me his tattoos.
Right.
He was part of the Kuomintang. Okay, he got sent over to be a bullet show.
Oh, to be one of the volunteers.
Volunteers. So when you talk about volunteer, I started to laugh. This guy actually had swim towards a U.S. ship.
Right.
Okay, and so that I get to meet him alive.
Okay.
You know.
But yeah.
Your volunteers kind of you got to know what they're doing.
So anyway, what is the you might say that because Hong colonial government is incompetent in enforcing the embargo, because basically think about it, it's basically like when say for example the Americans invading Afghanistan and you have a British colony actively shipping things to help the Taliban.
Right.
That is how serious it was, right? Fighting against the
so
Americans.
Hong Kong played a pivotal role,
right,
in terms of the change of the
right.
scenery's history.
Right. As Americans, you might be pissed off, but hey, that was history. Now, what was the geopolitical consequence for Hong Kong? The geopolitical consequence was that suddenly, in the minds of communist China, Hong Kong, being a British colony,
right,
was extremely useful for its rule and safety. Because the Chinese joined that war because they really sincerely believe General MacArthur is going to be invading into China.
right.
Because Chairman Mao was raised during a time in which China was constantly being invaded by foreign powers.
Right.
So he was paranoid about being invaded by foreign powers.
Right.
That was why he quickly sent troops to Tibet, for example. Right. That was why he sent troops into North Korea.
So this message is electrical to the minds in Chairman Mao's mind.
Well, at least Chairman Mao might have been tempted to take Hong Kong back, but I am sure his right-hand man, Zhou Enlai, his basically foreign secretary, Zhou Enlai is just his thinker, told him, no, I think the Korean War has proven beyond a doubt that this little British colony was extremely useful for our own survival. Therefore, we must protect it at all cost. It would be no use to us if it became part of the People's Republic. Ironically. Okay? So
luck number 2.
That was luck number 2, and therefore, even though they sent volunteers by the millions into North Korea to create a buffer zone that is now North Korea, they sent troops into Tibet, for example, they actually actively protected Hong Kong. In fact, with the fall of the British Empire, the greatest inconvenient truth, if you are a member of the Western press, please remember this. The greatest inconvenient truth is that the greatest protector of Hong Kong's way of life as a Victorian-era British imperial colony is actually the highest powers of the Chinese Communist Party ever since the Korean War.
God, this line should be a PhD thesis in itself.
But that is the inconvenient truth.
Reality.
That is reality, and that is the inconvenient truth. So, if you're still following me, then that was why. Okay, if you are still watching and you say, "I call BS," I don't buy your hypothesis, right? The thesis is wrong. I just ask you one simple question. The Americans probably knew that Hong Kong played that role during the Korean War. Right. And they were not pleased.
I'm sure they know.
Yes. So what happened is that the British still had imperial ambition, right? So in the 1950s, under President Eisenhower, the British, because Egypt had a new ruler, and he threatened to nationalize the Suez Canal, right? To the British, that was an affront. Not only was it an insult, a punch in the eye, but without the Suez Canal, they cannot effectively run any colonies beyond the Suez Canal. Between them and Suez
absolutely,
Canal,
time is of essence.
Right.
Yeah.
So you would say that, well, if Egypt is an independent country, why can't they run the Suez Canal themselves? Why can't they nationalize the Suez Canal? All I can say is this: Panama is also an independent country, but the running of the Panama Canal was only returned to the Panamanians a few years ago from the Americans. The Americans basically control it. So these canal things, canal politics, right? But anyway, so basically the British wanted to do with the Suez Canal what the Americans did with the Panama Canal. Okay, keep control.
Right.
But then when the French and the British sent troops to Egypt, they were quickly called back by America. And basically through that Suez Canal crisis, the Americans effectively told Britain, your days of empire is over. Okay? So ever since the Suez Canal, when the British knew that they can't control the Suez Canal, it became official policy that they are going to give up all of the colonies east of the Suez Canal. India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Burma, Malaya, Singapore, Borneo, so on and so forth. Okay? But then all these places became independent, or at least broke away from the British Empire's rule, right?
Well, they still honor the Queen, but
Part of the Commonwealth.
yeah, Commonwealth.
Commonwealth.
Yeah.
But then my question is this: but why Hong Kong? Why was Hong Kong spared?
Okay, so you supported your hypothesis
Hong Kong was only kept as a British colony, to be honest, at the unofficial request of the Chinese Communist Party.
because of the specific function it
Right,
serves.
because of the function it had served, and the Chinese Communist Party thought it would be convenient to leave this safety valve.
Actually, I think it's a necessity in those days. If people who got into the economy of China, post World War II, China could not even manufacture its own a single rim for the bicycle. It's primitive.
It is very primitive.
Okay, it's no joke.
But
you couldn't even forge.
Right. So if you are still watching, that is why in late 1970s, in fact, in the early 1970s, the British knew that because they are so into politics, right?
Right.
Hong Kong. There was two parts of Hong Kong that was ceded in perpetuity to the British forever, but there was one part that was leased from the Chinese, from the Qing dynasty, from the Qing courts, in 1898 on a 99-year lease basis, and that was the new territories in Hong Kong.
Right.
The new territories were leased on a 99-year basis. So by the early 1970s, Britain knew that lease, you had to start notice, it's coming to an end.
Right.
And officially, the first people in Hong Kong that raised it as an issue in Hong Kong were the bankers, because the bankers started asking in the late 1970s, well, we have less than 20 years before the end of the lease, can we offer 15-year mortgages in the new territories? Because legally they have no power. It's not a legally enforceable contract.
Right.
Right. And there's no laws. There's no plans when China takes back new territories. But then, of course, if you look at the strategic positioning of the British Empire in the early 1970s, they knew that the lease was coming up, and therefore they had to do something as well. So they were preparing for this. But in 1978, Deng Xiaoping, the then leader, the new leader, who took over from basically a period of turmoil, Deng Xiaoping knew that China's GDP has shrunken so much that economic weakness itself was a threat to national security. Okay? And under that particular situation, he knew that he had to increase the productivity and efficiency of the Chinese economy. And the only way to do that is to withdraw the state from the economy, i.e. liberalization.
Right.
Okay, liberal reforms. Right. And if they no longer provide active protection to Hong Kong, through neglect itself, the lower ranked bureaucrats would run wild. And also, Hong Kong people, lacking the knowledge of playing this empire game, would implode the city, such as placing a baby formula ban into Hong Kong, such as placing a ban of investment by foreigners, i.e. mainland Chinese, into Hong Kong properties and real estate, for example. Right?